Well, yeah, for the last, the last 2 weeks we was at the club, there was a few rumours flying about, and certain people that was outside of the club were mentioning a few things, and then it just, I think we played an FA Cup game, I think, the day before, or 2 days before, or something like that. And Frank just rung early in the morning before going to work and just said, "That's it, lads. I'm on the way to the bridge and we're done." And so I'll just wait. He said, "Look, I'll ring you after." And then, so it weren't... it's never nice, but it wasn't the biggest shock, if I'm being brutally honest. It still don't feel great, but...
But at the same time, I've got to say, I would suggest to you it would be a little bit different than most managers and coaches getting in to lose their job. I know it's part and parcel of it and they make moves. However, I don't think MD could deny or feel for you, the pair of you, because of the affinity and the relationship that you had with the club and the fans.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's no one more Chelsea than me. Grew up down the road from the club. I was there from an 8-year-old and obviously spent so long there. But obviously where Frank was the manager, Frank had all the dealings with people upstairs. I mean, don't get me wrong, Bruce Buck rung me in the afternoon and had a great conversation with Bruce Buck, such a class gentleman. So it was all fine. As I said, it's just never nice. And obviously leaving a club which is your boyhood club and one that you feel you have such an affinity with was difficult.
You mentioned that there were rumours for a couple of weeks before it happened. Were you disappointed with that? Because also, I mean, Tuchel was brought in so quickly, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I remember saying to my pals, literally the day we got the sack, if I was going to bring in a manager, I'd bring in Thomas Tuchel. Yeah. He's world class and he's proved that time and time again. But listen, it's never nice when you can hear things that are happening, maybe to do with your job or your mate's job, who's the manager, before it happens. But listen, it's football and it's the world we live in.
Joes, could you watch Chelsea straight away afterwards? Did you have a period of time where you struggled with it?
No, I watched them all the time, purely and simply because I had an affinity with so many of the players there, and I also wanted to see how they performed. But as I said, it is football. I mean, some of them certainly performed unbelievable since we've left, and some of them maybe not so much. So listen, I will never stop watching Chelsea. They're still my club, and there are moments initially after where you're sometimes looking at it and you have funny feelings when you're watching, but that kind of went after a couple of months. That went.
Did you look at some of those players that were performing well and go, hang on a minute, why didn't you do that when we were in there?
Do you know what? Not really. I mean, you do have those moments that maybe cross your mind, but then you do have to kind of reevaluate and go, well, listen, the managers may be asking different things of him. Some people get a little boost when a new manager comes in and then starts all of a sudden maybe putting it in a little bit more than what they was. They do get that's just players. It happened in our day. Do you know what I mean?
What about Jude? I was going to say to you, there must have been an element. You wouldn't be human, I don't think, if you didn't have an element when the boys won the Champions League. I mean, I'm a Chelsea man as well, and I was thrilled. However, there's certainly still a part of saying, you know, that could have been you. That could have been you.
Yeah, listen, I wish we won it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? Listen, we was involved in that Champions League campaign, so obviously, so we'll take half a medal somewhere, yeah? We won the group.
That's what I like to hear.
No, listen, I have to admit, you can't knock Tuchel and the way the players played. I mean, the teams they knocked out on the way to winning the final and then beating the magnificent Pep in a final and doing it 3 times that year. You can't help but pat everybody on the back. They deserved it.
I want to ask you about Frank and the job that he's doing at Everton at the moment. And when he took that role, what you thought about it? So he's won 2, lost 2 the opening 4 games, beat Brentford in the FA Cup, Leeds 3-0 as well, lost to Southampton and Newcastle. How's he finding it? Have you spoken to him about it?
Do you know what? I haven't spoken to him about the actual games since I spoke to him when he first got it, obviously, and was buzzing because I think it's a great job for him, and I think he'll do really well there. I think he's a little bit up and down at the minute. If you've watched the games, then they're kind of brilliant and then really poor. But I think having to follow someone whose style is maybe not the same as Frank's, like I think Rafa plays different type of football to Frank. It was a little bit similar to when we went in at Derby. We had to kind of change the style to the previous manager. So the hardest thing I think for Frank is that he's having to do it mid-season. You don't get the pre-season to be able to work with the players. So he's going to want to put across his ideas. He's got great coaches with him, and I think it will take time. And at the moment, let's get it right. The reason he got the job is because they're where they are. So it isn't going to happen overnight. But I think you can see some good signs.
Jody, what about the likes of, clearly he's wanting to, and it'll take a while to implement his own style and get his own players in and things like that. But one player I'm crying out to do well is Dele Alli, mate. I mean, I just think he's such a talent, and he's clearly lost his way. You know, there's a couple of managers come in at Spurs, and it's not worked out for him. You know, him and Lingard, I thought, were unbelievable. Was it the last World Cup? I thought were fantastic. Do you think Frank is the type and that can maybe put his arm around him and get the best out of something like Dele Alli?
Do you know what? If you was to probably pick the perfect person for someone to work with, you'd probably pick Frank. The type of player that he was, he'd done great with people like Mason Mount, but I think Dele Alli comes into that bracket of a player that should be arriving in the box and should be doing better, and Frank was the best ever for that as a midfielder. So I agree with you. Listen, a few years ago I thought Dele Alli was going to be an absolute megastar, but certain things happen in football, whether on or off the pitch, or goes through certain spells. Changes of managers can make or break people, and hopefully Frank will be a making of him.
Was it a big risk, do you think, taking that job where they are in the league at the moment, and the real risk of relegation, and like you say, coming in halfway through and having to change the dynamic?
I don't think so. I mean, listen, I think they got more than enough to stay up. I think it's a massive club. I think their supporters are fantastic. Whenever you play at their stadium, everybody knows they're in for a right ride with the fans. It isn't an easy job. Listen, they're there because they're not performing. But at the same time, I think that they've got more than enough to stay up, and I think there's foundations there to build on as well.
talkSPORT Breakfast with Laura Woods, Monday to Wednesday mornings 6 till 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.